Silence unsettles those who once fed on your insecurity. For people who always expected you to bow, to explain, to correct yourself, your refusal to justify feels like rebellion. And in a way, it is. But not an immature rebellion that shouts to be heard. It is a quiet revolution, an unspoken declaration. I owe no explanations for being who I am. Manipulators lose their power here, because manipulation only thrives where there's fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of abandonment, fear of disappointing. And when you stop reacting, when you stop feeding that cycle, their tactics collapse. The silence born of internal authority is like a stone wall. It doesn't react. It doesn't justify. It doesn't dance to someone else's tune. It simply is. And that presence alone destabilizes any attempt at control. Relationships built on your submission, whether emotional, intellectual, or behavioral, begin to show themselves for what they are: fragile, one-sided, imbalanced. When you stop explaining yourself, you break the pact of inferiority. You stop standing as someone begging for acceptance and begin to stand as someone who already accepts themselves, and that changes everything. Some people will walk away, and that is not failure. It's realignment, because your silence becomes a filter. It reveals who stayed out of genuine affinity and who only stayed because you were easy to control. Jung said individuation requires ruptures, and these ruptures are not punishments. They are liberations. When you stop justifying your presence, your choices, your boundaries, you start attracting relationships built on mutual respect, not on fear or dependence. But be prepared. Jung saw this integrity as one of the highest expressions of individuation, when someone not only knows their truth, but upholds it, without hesitation, without guilt, without the need for validation. An integrated person does not beg to be understood. They communicate, they express, but they do not convince. And if this message resonates with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next step of this journey into silence, integrity, and true inner freedom. An integrated person no longer feels the need to justify their existence. Their words flow from a solid center, not from a hidden lack. And that changes everything in how they are perceived. The world treats with more respect those who treat themselves with respect. And self-respect begins the moment you refuse to negotiate what is essential in you. Psychological integrity does not mean inflexibility. It means coherence. It is the ability to hold an internal line of truth, even under external pressure. It's when you feel discomfort in a situation, and even without rational proof, you trust your feeling. You don't build arguments, you don't present evidence. You simply say, "This does not resonate with me," and that is enough. This stance may seem simple, but in a world where most live disconnected from themselves, it is revolutionary. A world where decisions are based on opinions of others, where feelings are buried to avoid being called too sensitive, where boundaries are swallowed behind forced smiles to avoid being difficult. Integrity is the opposite of that. It is the art of being whole, of not fragmenting to please, of not hiding to avoid conflict. Jung knew that transformation is not about learning more theories. It is about embodying a new stance toward life. And this stance begins with the refusal to justify oneself. Because every compulsive justification carries a hidden question: am I enough? The integrated person no longer asks. They already know, even when the world insists otherwise. And here lies the paradox. The less you seek approval, the more respect you command. Integrity has weight, it has density, it has presence. That is why, without saying a word, a centered person can shift the entire energy of a room. They don't need to prove anything. Their internal coherence already speaks. People like this don't beg for space. They occupy it. And if this message resonates with you, consider subscribing. Because the journey into integrity, silence, and selfhood is only just beginning. Jung knew that transformation is not about learning more theories. It is about embodying a new stance toward life. And this stance begins with the refusal to justify oneself. Because every compulsive justification carries a hidden question. Am I enough? The integrated person no longer asks. They already know, even when the world insists otherwise. And here lies the paradox. The less you seek approval, the more respect you command. Integrity has weight, it has density, it has presence. That is why, without saying a word, a centered person can shift the entire energy of a room. They don't need to prove anything. Their internal coherence already speaks. People like this don't beg for space. They occupy it. And if this message resonates with you, consider subscribing. They no longer react out of insecurity. They act out of alignment. But here's the essential detail. This integrity is only possible when you stop betraying yourself, when you stop molding who you are just to be accepted, when you finally give yourself permission to feel, to choose, to act, even if no one else understands. This takes practice, it takes presence, it takes self-knowledge, but above all, it takes courage. The courage to take responsibility for your own existence without blaming others, without outsourcing your value. And when this integrity settles in, its effects are profound. Relationships change. The way you stand in your work changes. Your self-perception grows clearer. Anxiety dissolves. The urge to control what others think, it fades away. Because you stop living to be understood, and you start living to be true. But there is something deeper, something that moves beyond behavior into what you emanate. When you stop justifying yourself, you begin to radiate the energy of someone in control of themselves. And this energy, this frequency, is unconsciously felt by everyone around you. This is where the invisible shift occurs. The world begins to treat you as someone who does not negotiate. In the next and final part, we'll explore how this integrity transforms your relationship with the world. How, without saying a word, you come to be respected in ways that once felt impossible. Because when a person stops explaining themselves, everything changes. Not just inside, but around them. It's as if a new frequency begins to broadcast. You no longer whisper, "Please understand me." You radiate, "I know who I am, and I don't need your permission." And inevitably, the world responds. It's about finally becoming whole, and when that happens, people start listening to you differently. Unbalanced relationships lose their grip. Dynamics where you were submissive, predictable, easy to control, simply collapse. Not because you fought, but because you are no longer available to play that role. Silence shifts the entire configuration of your relationships because it communicates what you once begged for. It says, "I am not here to be shaped. I am here to be." And from there, you begin to attract a different kind of connection, deeper, more honest, more aligned with who you have become. Respect starts from the inside out, and the very first step is to stop justifying your own existence. But this journey requires presence, because in moments of doubt, the old impulse to explain will return. It will feel safer to please. It will feel easier to yield. And it is exactly in those moments that you must remember, every time you silence an explanation, you reaffirm yourself. You consolidate your integrity. You take your place in the world, not as someone begging for space, but as someone who already knows they belong. So now tell me in the comments, what is the explanation you find yourself repeating the most, that deep down you no longer want to give? Maybe it's about your emotions, your boundaries, your way of being. Write it down. This isn't just venting, it's a turning point. And if this message confronted you or inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who explains themselves too much, and consider subscribing so you can continue this journey into silence, integrity, and psychological freedom. And remember, this is only the beginning of the journey.